Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube. Hello, I'm Oliver Conway. And today we're joined by the BBC's Hugo Bachega in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. And Hugo, Israel's been hitting targets there for the best part of a month. Now it says it wants to occupy the south of the country. What are its plans exactly?
Yeah, Oliver, so what we're hearing from the Israeli officials is that they plan to create this security buffer zone in the south. In other words, this is an invasion that is happening, and that this could lead to an occupation of parts of Lebanon. So what we're seeing here is that, let's go back to what happened after 2024. Those villages and communities along the border that were completely destroyed, empty, residents hadn't been allowed to go back to their homes. And I think we'll see an expansion now of this so-called buffer zone. So the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, saying that Israel will keep security control over the area between the border and the Litani River. This is a river that is 30 kilometers, 20 miles from the border. So this is a huge area of the country. Is Israel planning to occupy, this entire region of Lebanon? We still don't know, but I think it is clear here that what the Israelis are planning to do is to create this area in the south that is clear of any kind of presence as this invasion continues, and we could see some kind of occupation of parts of Lebanon well beyond this conflict.
Yeah, in order to create that buffer zone, Israel Katz says, and I quote, "All homes in Lebanese villages near the border will be destroyed in accordance with the Rafah and Beit Hanoun model in Gaza." What does that mean for the people living there?
Yeah, I think this is very concerning because we're seeing similar tactics that were employed in Gaza being now employed in Lebanon, which is the destruction of villages, the destruction of communities. More than 1 million people have been displaced across Lebanon because of this conflict. And I've met many families, displaced families, and there is the real concern here that their houses may be destroyed, and that because of the situation in those villages and those communities, that even after the end of the war, and we don't know when this is going to be, that they're not going to be allowed to return to those homes. And obviously there is the fear that this could lead to a major humanitarian crisis in this country. And Lebanon has suffered so much in recent years. If you look at what's happened in the last 6 years, there was the pandemic, there was the massive economic crisis, there was the port explosion here in Beirut, then the war in 2024, and now another war. So obviously there's a lot of suffering here in this country, and there is this real concern among these displaced families, particularly the families that have come from those villages in the south of the country, that again, they may never be able to go back to those villages.
Yeah, as you say, 1 million already displaced according to the Lebanese authorities. Israel saying something like 600,000 people who live in the south won't be able to return until Israel is safe, which could be a very long time. What is day-to-day life like for the people forced to flee?
It is a very difficult situation, and the government simply doesn't have the ability to provide basic services, to provide what those people need in terms of supplies, in terms of basic needs, really. So they are relying on human rights organizations, on external help. And we've met some families living here in Beirut, and they were talking about a very difficult situation, especially for the children, because obviously schools have been closed, schools have been turned into shelters, and entire families living in improvised tents in places like squares and public spaces. So it is a very difficult situation for those families, and as the conflict continues, they simply don't know when or if they'll be able to go back home.
Now, as well as the people who've been displaced, more than 1,000 people have been killed, according to Lebanon. Those include UN peacekeepers, at least one Lebanese soldier, and 3 journalists. And you went to their funeral.
Exactly, and this really gives you an idea of the fear that people across the country have of not knowing when the next Israeli airstrike will hit. In many of those attacks, the Israeli military issues warnings, giving people some time to leave those areas. But in some of those cases, particularly in suspected targeted assassinations, there's no warning. So obviously this has created fear, panic, and obviously anger across this country. So I went to the funeral on Sunday of the 3 journalists who were killed in what seems to be a targeted Israeli airstrike on at least one of them, Ali Shaeb, who worked for the Al-Mana television station, which is owned by Hezbollah. And the killing of these 3 journalists, Fatima Fatuni and also Mohammed Fatuni from the Al-Mayadeen television station, sparked a lot of anger in this country, a lot of commotion as well, and criticism and condemnation of Israel, because the Lebanese president Joseph Aoun described this as a blatant crime, saying that journalists have been targeted. And again, the Israeli military said that 2 of those journalists, Mohammed Fatuni and Ali Shaeb, had involvement with Hezbollah. The IDF said Ali Shaeb was an intelligence operative within the group, even though there has been no evidence to support the claims that they had military involvement within the organization. And there's been a lot of anger here, a strong reaction in this country following those attacks.
Now, this is a difficult situation for the Lebanese government. This latest bout of fighting was sparked by Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel in response to the killing of its sponsor in Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. But Hezbollah is separate from the government, sometimes described as a state within a state. How popular is it, and is this violence turning people against it?
Yeah, it is a very complex situation, because you have this organization, Hezbollah, which is not only a militia. I think outside Lebanon, people, know of Hezbollah as being this powerful armed organization. But here in Lebanon, Hezbollah is a political party. It has representation in parliament, representation in the government. The labor minister, the health minister come from Hezbollah. And Hezbollah came under a lot of criticism in the very beginning of the war, including from some of its supporters who blamed Hezbollah for dragging Lebanon into another conflict with Israel. I think that situation has changed. I think we're back now to those old divisions and old positions. Those who oppose Hezbollah remain critical of Hezbollah, saying that Hezbollah is more interested in defending its own positions and defending the interests of Iran. And those who support Hezbollah continue to be, in favor of the group, support the group. And many people, have been telling me that they see Hezbollah as being the only force, the only group in this country capable of defending them and protecting them. So it does feel that we're back to the old situation here. And what makes everything, much more difficult for the Lebanese authorities is that they simply don't have the means to disarm Hezbollah by force. And this has been, something that's been rejected by the Lebanese authorities even before this war, to use force against Hezbollah. And, the president and many others here have been saying that disarming Hezbollah will only happen with time, but through a diplomatic process, through negotiations, that it is going to be impossible to disarm Hezbollah, or even to try to destroy Hezbollah, if you like, by bombs or by military incursions. And I think one of the problems here is that Hezbollah was created during the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. And a lot of people are saying that what is going to happen is that this is going only to embolden Hezbollah and reinforce Hezbollah's position that their presence is needed to fight the Israeli occupation of parts of Lebanon.
You mentioned the occupation of Lebanon in the 80s and 90s. Israel was there for 18 years before it was forced out. Are we seeing history repeating itself?
It is very difficult, and I cannot see at the moment any kind of appetite in Israel for some kind of long-term a massive Israeli presence and occupation of parts of Lebanon, because that would come, with a huge cost for the Israelis. What is very likely is that Israel will try to seize some territory and occupy some territory that it may consider strategic. Remember, before the war, Israel was already occupying 5 locations along the border. So I think we're going to see an expansion of this Israeli presence and occupation of parts of Lebanon. But I think it is very difficult to see, a situation in which Israel will be sending thousands, if not tens of thousands of troops to occupy parts of Lebanon. And again, I think, there's only one way to try to come up with a solution to this crisis, and that is through diplomacy. But right now we're not seeing, any talks. The Lebanese government has, made an offer to engage in negotiations with the Israelis. But I think Israel sees this as a window of opportunity to really try to degrade Hezbollah further, to destroy whatever infrastructure capabilities Hezbollah has near the border, to then try to engage in some kind of diplomacy here.
Hugo, thank you. Hugo Bachega in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. If you'd like to hear more from the Global News podcast, click the link below. Thanks for watching.